Welcome to everyone who's joining. We're going to wait a moment as people file into the room. So we'll give it a minute here and then we'll get started. Welcome to our Education USA LLM series. Today we will be discussing the admissions process as well as the concentrations for LLM and the bar exam. We have 5 amazing experts here to speak to you about these processes and their programs. Education USA is funded by the U.S. Department of State. We have advising centers all over the world in more than 180 countries, and you can find your local advisor at educationusa.state.gov. And we support students with free advising and resources to help you study in the United States. So I will go ahead and pass things over to our experts now. Andrew, you can go ahead and get us started.
Thank you so much, Jenica. So I'm going to take a quick moment and get our presentation up and running. Okay. I hope you can see on your screen the slide indicating the titles for today's presentation. We'll be focusing on LLM concentrations, the bar exam, and admission to practice. My colleagues and I could tell you that each one of these topics could be its own session, its own presentation, probably multiple presentations. We're going to be covering a lot of details today, a lot of information, but we're going to try to do so in an organized way and demystify the process of bar admission, the bar exam, and how to really think about concentrations as an approach to your LLM studies. So let me first introduce my colleagues who will be joining me today. First, we have Anya Grossman from Berkeley Law. Also, we have Dr. Carly Topke from Texas Law. We have myself from Syracuse University College of Law, along with my colleague Amy Houghton from Cornell Law School.
Hi.
And finally, Oleg Kobelev from Duke Law School.
Hi, everyone.
And so I will now turn it over to my colleague Anya, who will be talking about LLM concentrations.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks to all of you for joining us. My name is Anya Grossman, Director of Global Outreach for the LLM program at Berkeley Law. So first, I wanted to start off this panel discussion with what types of LLM concentrations even exist. So what's interesting is that the US legal education system doesn't actually require standardization in graduate legal degrees, such as a Master's of Law. So this is why you see different schools offering all different kinds of LLM degrees. And they tend to fall into 3 kind of main buckets. So the first one is a general LLM degree. Schools just call it an LLM degree. The second one is similarly a general LLM degree, but with the ability to specialize, earn a certificate, or otherwise more formally demonstrate gaining a particular area of expertise during your studies. And finally, the third bucket is an LLM degree in a particular subject matter. So for example, the degree you will get is Master of Laws in Environmental Law or something like that. It will specifically designate a certain practice area. The type of degree a schools offer will show up on your diploma when you graduate, but other information such as specializations or certificates or other things, depending on the school, can show up on your transcript. So examples from this panel of the 5 schools that are here, we actually do offer a variety of different types of LLM concentrations. So it's good for us to be here, so you know. Berkeley Law, we offer general LLM with the ability to earn a certificate of specialization. We have a number of them and they're quite popular with our LLM students. Cornell Law offers a general LLM degree. So does Syracuse, and Duke and Texas also, similar to Berkeley, offer a general LLM with the ability to earn a certificate. And you'll be able to meet with all of us in our Zoom room afterwards and ask us more questions about our particular programs. So what's the purpose of having different concentrations? Why aren't these things all the same? Different forms of concentration allow law schools to highlight their area of strength, whether that's depth, breadth, or a combination of depth and breadth. And it also allows you to choose the program that works best for your future goals. So how you find the degree or concentration that's best for you. Consider your goals for pursuing an LLM degree and then use that to help narrow down your choices. So this is a short and limited list, but some potential options may include exploring new areas of study, deepening your knowledge in your existing area of practice or a specialty, pivoting from a previous area of practice to a new one, demonstrating to future potential employers an area of expertise, or potentially pursuing pursuing US bar exam eligibility. And my colleagues will be talking a lot about that last bullet in the rest of the presentation. So the more focused you are on a particular area of study, the more you may want to consider an LLM program offering a specialized LLM degree or a general LLM degree with a certificate of specialization. On the other hand, if you're the most excited about the ability to be flexible with your course selection, you may want to consider an LLM program offering a general LLM degree or one with otherwise flexible course enrollment requirements. So just some do's and don'ts that I want to leave with you before I pass it on to my colleagues about LLM concentrations. Do let the availability of specialized LLM degrees, certificates, or concentrations guide your course enrollment. But don't assume that concentrations limit your course offerings. Many schools, including those with specialized LLMs and certificates, including Berkeley Law, offer courses in all different practice areas regardless of their degree concentrations. So what you should do is look up the course selection at each school in which you're interested to find out what is available for you to study. And also do show employers your areas of interest in places other than your diploma, including your transcript, your CV, your involvement in student groups, pro bono work, all sorts of other activities. But the very most important one, do find the LLM program that's best for your specific goals. And with that, thank you, and I'll pass it on to my colleagues.
Hi everyone, I'm going to elaborate a little bit on the bar exam. So I know the bar exam, oh, I'm Carly Tepke, sorry about that. So the bar exam, there's a lot of different advantages and disadvantages. And right now you might be kind of thinking about, well, do I want to take a bar exam at the end of my LLM? So we're gonna highlight some of those key things. First of all, there are a lot of different advantages. Maybe after your LLM, your plans are to practice law in one of the United States. So there's a lot of flexibility, and another one of my colleagues will talk about all of those different options, but there is the opportunity to stay in the US either for OPT or possibly get a work visa afterwards and continue to practice law in the United States. Also, having the bar exam, it opens up multiple career opportunities. Maybe you're looking at working in a big firm in the US or abroad, or working in an NGO or working for the government. Having the bar allows you that flexibility of practicing it in one of these different areas. And also having a bar exam on your CV is very marketable. It really shows that you have a deep understanding of the US law and that you are able to work with US clients, and it builds your professional credentials, and is also, of course, a CV booster because it is so difficult. There's a lot of kind of prestige behind having a license in one of the United States. And depending on what area you're interested in practicing law in, if you're interested in corporate law or maybe in energy law, maybe a different state would be would be better for you to take the bar in, because that's, you know, the kind of the concentration of that area. And there's also, you know, the positive advantage of bragging rights. Having the bar, everyone knows how difficult it is. So it shows that you were able to, you know, complete your degree and then study like crazy and pass this very hard exam. On the other hand, there are some disadvantages that you should be aware of, that not all states in the US allow LLMs to take the bar exam. So it is limited to which state you can actually sit in. And another disadvantage would be the course requirements. So out of your LLM degree, which is usually about 24 to 28 credit hours for over the year, half of those will be taken up by bar required subjects. So if you have a specialization that you really want to focus on, maybe you really want to do human rights law or energy law, and you want to take an entire 24 to 28 credit hours specifically focused in that area, you won't be able to do that with the bar, because half of your classes will have to be certain bar classes, things like professional responsibility and legal writing and contracts law. So kind of those foundational classes, the foundational legal classes for the United States. And there's also a cost. And by cost, it could be extra credit hours. So maybe you need to take a few extra hours to make sure you are meeting those requirements. The cost of a commercial bar prep provider. So I highly recommend, and I would try to require, if I could, that every student who wants to take the bar purchases a commercial bar prep package. These packages can start 9 months before the bar or 3 months before the bar, depending on what you buy, but they help you and they give you an overview of all of the bar subjects. Because unlike JD students who have that 3 years of learning all of the subjects they need to be successful on the bar, LLMs don't. You only have 1 academic year or so to kind of prepare yourself. So I highly recommend that, but those commercial bar prep classes, they range anywhere from $1,000 to upwards of $4,000, depending on which package you buy. There's also the cost of living and having an accommodation over the summer. So if you're taking the bar exam is offered in July, and also in February. So after your LLM, you have about 2 to 3 months to live and study like crazy for the bar. So you need to be prepared to pay those extra costs. And also there's the cost of transferring your score. So if you take the bar in Texas, for example, and then want to transfer that to another state that offers the uniform bar, there is a cost to that. And actually, there's also a pretty large cost for sitting for the bar itself. In Texas, it's over $1,000 for a foreign trained LLM to sit for the bar. There's also time. So the application submission takes a lot of time. And this can also be seen as a cost, actually, because it is. For the New York bar, for example, if you want to take the July bar after you graduate, your application, the first part of your application is due the October before. So almost a full year before you are sitting the bar, you already have to complete part of your application. So there is a lot of time. It's a very strenuous process in that you have to collect all your documents, you have to find all your references, and the time for bar preparation. At Texas Law, we actually start preparing our students for the bar. We have a special bar prep class that starts in September. So that's almost a year before the bar, where our students are already taking their time to study for the bar, because as I said, you don't have that 3 years to study, you only have that actually 9 months to a year. And then there's also the different challenges and stress of bar preparation. Bar preparation, it takes a lot of time, but also the summer before you're taking the bar, if you're taking the July bar, you'll be studying 10 hours a day with no summer vacation for you. It's very strenuous. And there's also a disadvantage would be that there is a really low passage rate for foreign trained LLMs, which ends up meaning that you re-examination, so taking the bar again, so that's more time and cost, because while you're studying for the bar, you should not be working. So that means you have no income and you're just spending all of your time studying. And then also bar study time does use up some of that OPT, the optional practical training, where you can actually, if you aren't using it for the bar, you could be staying and doing an internship or doing a junior associate type job and doing some work after graduation. So there's definitely some things to weigh when looking at whether you should sit for the bar or you shouldn't, but it's definitely up to you and what your future goals are. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Carly. I'll take over and start the section on the New York bar exam specifically, but it is just such a rich and large area that I'll be using and enlisting the help of my colleague from Cornell also to help me out as well. The goal in this discussion here around the bar exam, we're talking about advantages and disadvantages, is really to give you that dose of reality in terms of what to expect when it comes to taking the bar exam. There are those sort of hard and soft advantages and disadvantages that we've talked about, but there's also a lot of administrative processes and steps, procedural hurdles, and other milestones that you have to hit in order to become eligible to take the New York bar exam and then actually become admitted to practice in New York. So Amy and I will be focusing on these 4 steps. I wish there were only 4 things you had to do to become licensed to practice in New York. Unfortunately, there are many, many details behind these 4 steps that we'll talk about today, more or less as an introduction to what these steps are. And also you should know that there is, while we have tried to organize the process into these simple 4 steps, there's really no singular step-by-step pathway to bar licensure. Some of these steps could come before or after others. Perhaps you've already satisfied 1 or 2 of the requirements that we're going to be talking about. So the goal really is to just put all this out in front of you to help you organize how best you can and will be able to satisfy some of these requirements. And it really all starts with the Board of Law Examiners. I have a link here. It's not a link you can click on now, but it's a hyperlink you could take down. This really should be your starting point for learning the technical rules of what's required of you if you desire to become eligible for the New York bar and ultimately to become licensed to practice in New York. It would be very helpful before your LLM program to start the process even today, if you'd like. One of those processes would involve the foreign evaluation form. This is more or less your online profile with the Board of Law Examiners, where you're including your biodata, you're getting your BOLI, we call it your BOLI, the Board of Law Examiners, you're getting your BOLI number, and you're more or less, like I said, you're setting up that profile that you'll use on a regular basis during the process of becoming eligible for the bar exam. Keep in mind that the Board of Law Examiners determines your eligibility to sit for the New York bar exam. They want to look at your foreign academic credentials, maybe even your experience if you have your foreign license to practice law. And they want to eventually also look at what you've done in your LLM program here in the United States. So again, it is the Board of Law Examiners who will determine your eligibility. It's not the LLM program or the law school that you're attending in the United States. And just note too that the Board of Law Examiners has an administrative staff that will be in contact with you on a regular basis about missing documents, about questions you might have about this more or less administrative or paperwork process that's involved for eligibility. And like I said, I just want to underscore, now is really the time to, I think, start this process. New York will require you to submit documentation from your foreign law school, so your LLB transcripts, for example, as well as documentation related to your foreign license to practice, if you have it, or if you don't have your foreign license to practice yet, they will need to see that your foreign legal education that you've already completed will satisfy the licensure requirements in your home country, so that you've already started to satisfy some of those admissions requirements in your home country. So again, that can change from country to country, whatever the education requirements are, wherever you might be. And so now is the time to figure out and work with your institutions in your home country to gather documents to send to New York. It's always helpful when students have started this process before they come to start their LLM program, as opposed to being in the US and then trying to coordinate with folks back home to go to your law school, talk to the registrar, go to your licensing authority, get documents sent directly to New York. So again, I just want to highlight, if you can start this process now, sooner rather than later, it will help you immensely later on during your LLM studies. The next step in the process, beyond this sort of paperwork administrative process that I mentioned earlier, is to obtain a qualifying LLM degree. And this is really where I come in, where my colleagues here on this presentation come in. This is, excuse me, this is where New York wants to see that you have completed an LLM that satisfies a few other now academic requirements, moving away from the administrative paperwork now to the academic requirements. New York articulates a specific set of courses that they'd like you to take. So I think I can speak for most, if not all, of the representatives on this call that all of our LLM programs will offer courses that will allow you to meet these academic requirements. For example, we offer a course that exposes you to the introduction to the American legal system, that exposes you to US legal writing. Again, that'll satisfy these New York requirements. I think we all obviously offer at least six credits of subjects that are tested on the New York bar exam. So those are doctrinal courses like contracts, torts, property, constitutional law, evidence, etc. And then also a legal ethics or professional responsibility course that you would want to take as well, both as a requirement in your LLM degree, but also to prepare you for an exam that will be required by New York called the MPRE, the Multi-State Professional Responsibility Exam, which you'll hear more about a bit later in the presentation. So again, this is really the slice of the pie where the LLM programs come in, where myself and my colleagues spend a lot of our time working with students on making sure that your LLM program can be set up and designed to satisfy these academic requirements. Things to think about during your LLM program in terms of using your LLM to prepare for the bar exam, study for the bar exam. Some of this was already mentioned a bit earlier, but I think it's helpful to reiterate and to highlight. Just to give you a sense that when we say bar exam, what we're really thinking is the two-day UBE, Uniform Bar Exam. It's quite difficult. And so some of the academic advice that you get from us and from your LLM programs is given to you through the lens of knowing just how difficult the bar exam can be to pass as a foreign educated student. And so some of that advice revolves around maybe taking more than the minimum. So some students only have time in their schedule to take 6 credits of bar tested subjects. Other students, I recommend, should be taking many more credits towards the bar exam in those subjects. You want to, I think, before you arrive to your LLM program, take a look at the course schedules that are available. Try to map out your courses from semester to semester, knowing that some subjects will only be offered in one semester versus another. And then some subjects may be offering at different credit levels or different, however the units are measured at your law school. Some courses are 3 credits, others are 5 credits. How does that impact your course load for a particular semester? Again, these are things you'll want to think about, but also discuss freely with your LLM academic advisors too. Mentioned earlier by Carly was the idea of taking a bar prep course. Some law schools offer 4 credit bar prep classes, and so do look for that on the course schedule as well. And then also wanting to make sure we highlight the idea of these commercial test prep companies. This is almost a rite of passage for any bar taker, whether it's New York or anywhere else, is to enlist a 6 to 8 week bar prep program through a private test prep company like Barbary, like Kaplan. And these companies provide scheduled test prep lectures, practice exams, all of that stuff that occurs and that you'll be exposed to after your LLM studies. to really round out your exposure to all of the material that you will hopefully know and be tested on during the bar exam as well. So again, just know this is an additional layer of support to you for the bar exam as thinking about really gaining exposure to that subject matter also. So those are the first 3 steps. I will hand it off now to my colleague Amy to deal with and handle the next set of steps we have.
Thanks, Andrew. So I'm going to briefly review the rules for New York admission. So as Andrew went through, you've now completed the first 3 steps and received a passing UBE score. Now, in order to qualify to practice, you'll have about 6 more boxes to check prior to being admitted to the New York bar. You'll need to complete most of these steps within 3 years of the application deadline, and that time begins to run from the 2nd day of the UBE. So we're going to begin with additional test scores. As Andrew previously mentioned, the multi-state professional responsibility exam is offered 3 times a year. It's offered in March, August, and November, and many LLM students take this test during their studies while they're here. Then you'll need to complete the New York Law course. You can take this online class up to 1 year prior to the UBE. The New York Law course is preparing you for the New York Law exam. The New York Law exam is a 50 multiple choice question test, and it's offered 4 times a year. Again, you can complete this requirement 1 year prior to sitting for the UBE. You'll also need to show 50 hours of pro bono work. Qualifying pro bono hours can be completed in another state or country up to 1 year prior to your LLM study or any time prior to admission. So this work can be done in your home country well before ever coming to the US. New York also has a skills requirement. Now, most LLM applicants fulfill with either Pathway 4 apprenticeship or Pathway 5, practice in another jurisdiction. Again, this work can be completed outside the US prior to your studies. So you're almost there. You'll submit your application for admission to practice as an attorney in the state of New York with all of the above, including a $375 registration fee and affidavits of good moral character and legal employment affidavits from every law-related position you've held, including paid and unpaid internships, associate positions, and volunteer work. Finally, there'll be a character and fitness interview prior to swearing in. And then to remain in good standing as a newly admitted New York attorney, you'll need to complete 32 continuing legal education credits during your first 2 years of admission. And if you plan to practice in another state, there are some US jurisdictions that will allow admission on motion based on your New York license. Otherwise, you'll need to go through a similar process, which my colleague Oleg will now review.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. My name is Oleg Kobylev. I'm with Duke Law School. I'd like to talk a little bit about bar exams other than New York. And just to preface it by saying that the vast majority of foreign legal graduates will take the New York bar, and we've also have 2 other bars that we'll talk about. But Andrew, why don't we go to the next slide? So the second most popular bar, at least in my experience, is California. And as you've heard my colleagues talk about previously, each bar is different, each state is different. California really has 2 different pathways depending on your qualifications and your home country education. If you are licensed and duly admitted to practice law in your country, it's actually quite straightforward for you to qualify for taking the bar exam. Now, keep in mind that there are some requirements that you have to fulfill, some administrative requirements, and I'm happy to talk about it in the Q&A. But basically, you could just review the website of the California Bar Examiners and then go through it. The hard pathway is really for students who are not admitted in their home country for one reason or another. You have to complete 20 credits in the US, and 12 of those credits must be tested on the California bar exam. And one of the biggest issues that we often encounter with this pathway is that California requires that you take an ethics course that covers California rules of professional conduct. So when you're looking at programs, many programs outside of California do not cover it, at least explicitly. So you should ask that question. One nice thing before we go to Washington to mention about the harder pathway is that California allows you to take an ethics course outside your general LLM degree. So you can actually finish the LLM and then take a standalone ethics course, and some universities offer it, and it can be online. Okay, now we'll go to Washington. So Washington, D.C., in my experience, is quite difficult to qualify for. First of all, it requires 26 credits, which is higher than New York, 24. And they really have to be substantially concentrated on a single subject tested on UB. So that is also a big issue for many LLM students because we don't necessarily have most of our law schools, the opportunity to take 26 credits in each specific subject. And so listed below are some of the subjects that are included. Now remember, many of these courses are more than 2 or 3 credits. So for example, you need to get to 26 credits, but you don't need to have all 12 subjects. So just keep that in mind. Okay, and let's go to the next slide. And I think the third state that has become relatively popular is Texas. And Texas has several different pathways toward eligibility. Basically, for common law students from common law countries, you may be able to qualify without an LLM at all as long as you've practiced. That's under Pathway 1. Under Pathway 2, if you haven't practiced for enough years, you can complete the LLM with course requirements that are substantially similar to what my colleagues described for the New York bar. Pathway 3 is sort of a combination, I think, of Pathway 1 and 2. And Pathway 4 is sort of for a law degree that is not common law-based degree. You still have to be admitted to practice in your home country, and you have to have an LLM degree. So it is actually a rather difficult pathway. But those are sort of the primary ways that folks can qualify. And I believe starting in February, Texas will be accepting UB transfer scores. But one of the things I want to mention about the transfer, I saw that it was also in the Q&A, is that although you're able to transfer your score, the states retain jurisdiction over your eligibility requirements. So for example, in my state of North Carolina, LLMs are not able to be admitted to practice based on their LLM degree. And so although you are able to transfer the UB score, you are still ineligible to be admitted to the bar because of the sort of the eligibility thresholds. And that is true for other states as well. So you have to carefully look at the eligibility requirements for each state that you hope to transfer your UB score into. Let's go to our next slide. Do we have another slide, or is this it, Andrew? Okay, so there are a couple of other states that I just wanted to, oh, here we go. So there are a couple of other states that I'm familiar with that our students, LLM students have taken the bar at, and they're listed on the left side of your screen. Some of them, like Connecticut, are quite similar to what New York requires, and some have different variations, particularly Georgia, Washington, and Massachusetts. Illinois tends to be a fairly popular state to take the bar if you have practiced for an extended period of time, because it has relatively straightforward requirements. And the last thing I'd like to point out is that you can find extensive information about every single bar exam, including sort of a chart of all the 50 states in the 2020 Comprehensive Guide to Bar Admission Requirements. It's published by National Conference of Bar Examiners. It's free. It's available online. And the hyperlinks in this slide will point you to the specific rule in each state, so you can read about those as well. So if I'm assuming this presentation will be available to you as a PDF, and if so, you should be able to click on those and go to that state's bar examiner's webpage and read about the eligibility for those states. And I believe that's all from me.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So that wraps up our presentation. I hope it was informative and insightful for many of you. I have included here on the last slide the email addresses for each of our programs. You can get in touch with us via email, but also there is time now to take some questions from the Q&A with our panel, and also to jump into eventually some breakout rooms that will open up after the Q&A is finished. So I haven't had a chance to look at some of the questions. I wasn't sure if anyone has.
So we answered some of the questions.
Okay.
There's a lot of questions about the New York bar exam. There are some that are open in the queue. Oh, one thing that I would just like to touch on is so much of the New York bar, Andrew touched on this with the eligibility evaluation and even the whole admissions process. It really comes down to the documents that you're submitting to the Board of Law Examiners and to the court. So while the question here about if you've practiced but not as an attorney, it comes down to if you were working with attorneys, there's, you know, again, it's the courts, they have lots of minutia as to what they're comparing your work to, if it fits their criteria. But that being said, one of the things about the time that Carly was talking about, it takes a long time to be admitted, quite honestly. If you sit for the bar in July, you're going to get your score. You're going to be told if you passed or failed by the end of October or early November, typically, not this year because the exam was held late, but in a normal year. And then you're going to submit your character and fitness application. And even if you got that in on time and it was there by the end of December or beginning of January, you're likely not getting an interview and being sworn into the bar until, March. So even if you have OPT, you're likely not even admitted as an attorney in New York during your OPT year. So don't sit the bar because you're thinking about OPT. If you're doing OPT, you're likely going to be a foreign associate at a firm and not need to have that bar license. So I hope that answers that question. But the whole thing with pathways, it may fit as long as it fits their definition of legal work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Amy. There's a question here, and Anya, I hate to put you on the spot, but it's asking about bar passage rate in California for foreign lawyers. I wasn't sure if that's a statistic you might have.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's low. Each year it changes a little bit. I think it tends to hover around 15%. But I do want to, as I say that information, provide you with additional context. California gathers statistics differently than New York and also differently than other states. So you can't actually compare those statistics head to head. And like Oleg mentioned earlier, California has different pathways to take the bar exam. So if you've already been admitted as an attorney, you can go ahead and take the California bar exam right now. And so some people do that. They don't have your English language abilities. They haven't done an LLM in the United States. And so they might, stop working, fly to California, take the bar exam, fail, and then that drives down the statistics. So there are a lot of different reasons that the statistics might be lower than your experience might be. So don't be scared of the low passage rate. It is still a very difficult bar exam. I'm not going to tell you that's an easy process, but it is not that much more difficult than some of the other bar exams in the United States that the statistics might suggest.
Yeah. Thank you. And so there's two questions here that I think are somewhat related, so I'll actually tackle them both. One relates to taking the bar exam in one state, being able to practice in others. And I guess one way to describe it is we have a very fragmented legal system here in the United States. And so you have to think about it as becoming eligible to practice, or excuse me, becoming eligible to take the bar in one state, becoming admitted in that state. You really are restricted in what you can do in terms of transferring your score out of that state. As Oleg was saying earlier, not every state enables applicants to practice in their state if they haven't satisfied their underlying eligibility requirements. So it is a pretty fragmented system. And then related to that, there is a question here about the JD versus the LLM. And I think one of the biggest differences among those two programs, aside from the fact that the LLM is traditionally 1 year, the JD is traditionally 3 years, it's that quintessential traditional 3-year American style legal education, is that a JD degree will enable you to sit for the bar exam in any state. And so that obviously unlocks more opportunities to take the bar or become licensed to practice in many more states.
Andrew, if I can just chime in here
Sure.
for a second. Looking at the questions, one thing I wanted to highlight, at least in terms of the New York bar, is that although things look very complicated and technical, one thing that we found, at least at Duke Law School, is that students who receive a negative answer in terms of their eligibility, that is often not the end of the road for them. There's a process of petitioning the Court of Appeals directly. This is when you can kind of put your lawyer hat on and you can petition and make an argument as to why you can, you're still, should be allowed to sit for the bar even if you don't fit neatly within the rules. And obviously the success rate depends, but at least our students at the law at Duke have been very successful in being able to convince the court that their particular circumstances are such that they should be deemed eligible. And I suspect that other bar exams have rules like that. It's typically you're seeking a waiver of strict compliance with the requirements of a particular bar exam. But you just have to be thoughtful about why you're asking for it. And obviously it needs to be grounded in your analysis of the law and the circumstances, your personal situation.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I'll jump in there. I saw a question about Texas and the percentage of foreign lawyers that generally pass the Texas bar. So right now it's about anywhere between 25 and 30% have been passing the Texas bar. But in the last 5 years, I created this early LLM bar prep at Texas Law, and we've seen our numbers go anywhere between 60 and 70%. So it just depends. I mean, I think that really shows you that early preparation makes it much more likely that you're going to pass the bar. So you want to think about that lots of preparation and early preparation.
Mm-hmm. We have a few questions related to the California bar here towards the end, Anya. I'm not sure if you...
I see. Okay, so for California, if you have a bar license from your home country, can that be enough? So the answer is only the State Bar of California can give you that answer. In general, for most people, being admitted to practice in their home jurisdiction is usually what they're looking for. But I personally can't say with any specificity, so you will want to reach out to California and submit your documentation. And if they say, no, it's not enough, then you do need to complete an LLM degree in the United States with certain coursework requirements.
I think that's a really good point, Anya, is that, we represent law schools, but we do not make the decisions about who is or is not eligible for any particular bar in any state based on your own specific circumstances, background, education, etc. So a lot of the advice we're giving, we're speaking from our knowledge of the rules, but also our experience in the students that we've had come through our programs and some of the successes or failures they may have had in becoming eligible. And so all this advice was sort of given with the caveat that you really also need to confirm with the bar examiners, the eligibility bodies, those making the decisions about your application to sit for the bar and become licensed are ultimately the authority when it comes to your specific circumstances about the bar exam and licensure.
And I'll say, I know this is true for Berkeley, I'm sure it's true for my fellow panelists. Once you are a student at one of our schools, we have plenty of help for you on that front and your specific situation. So right now we can only speak generally, but once you're our student and we have much more time with you, you'll be getting a lot more resources, and you can ask for individualized questions. So I can answer the next question about California from Lewis here. So he has a JD from Canada, wants to practice in California, but he's been told that you need to obtain an LLM degree in order to be able to sit for the bar in California. Is that correct? So again, like Oleg mentioned, that is one of the paths. That's the more difficult path. If you've already been admitted to practice, you may not need to complete an LLM degree or coursework, but if you do, yes, you would need to do an LLM degree in the United States with certain specific coursework requirements. And the process does vary depending on which other state bar exam you might be interested in taking. So if you get anything from this presentation, it's probably that the bar is confusing and it differs state by state. So again, each school will have people who can help you kind of figure out what will work best for you and your plan. And we can all answer questions really about all of the different states that you might be interested in pursuing eligibility for.
There's a few technical questions here about the recording being available. I believe that would be made available later on the Education USA's website. And then there should be links to our individual breakout rooms shared with everyone separate from this, hopefully in the chat box or elsewhere.
So I'd like to address that question, and maybe we all might want to
Yeah.
chime in about if this is going to be an exceptionally competitive cycle given past year possible deferrals and so on. I would say it's going to be just as competitive as any other year. I don't see any change from my perspective. And so if you are interested in pursuing your LLM degree starting in fall of 2021, get your application in. By our deadlines, so you'll be on that first cycle review. But anybody else might want to chime in from their perspective.
I would just say that I completely agree with what my Cornell colleague just said. Here at Duke, we are very interested in seeing strong applicants, and we don't expect that our admission standards will really change in any appreciable way. I will add that, from our perspective, we'd be very interested in hearing how the students have been dealing with the aftermath of COVID-19. And I think the stories of your resilience and how you adjusted to this sort of sudden change would be helpful from sort of the application perspective. And I would encourage students not to be worried about, well, I wasn't maybe studying, or there are all these difficulties in my life because of the pandemic. You should answer that question honestly and clearly, rather than leave it to the admission officer to sort of guess what happened to you.
So there's a question here about becoming licensed in New York without an LLM, so through the pathway of apprenticeship, and I would just refer that person directly to the rules on apprenticeship and to the Board of Law Examiners to gain insight on that in terms of your specific circumstances, questions, background, etc.
I see a question here about the DC bar, and the question is about whether you can do distance learning. I believe you cannot do distance learning for the DC bar. I have to go back and double check, but that is my understanding. And that is also true for the New York bar, at least, if that wasn't mentioned earlier, that you have to be, although of course, it sort of depends on what in a normal year, I guess is what I should qualify that. You know, under the current circumstances, distance learning is allowed in New York and in DC, but that will expire most likely at the end of next semester.
So there's a fresh question here. If I take an LLM in California, for example, is it possible to sit for the New York bar exam? The short answer to that is yes. So if you have a desire to take the bar exam in one specific state, for example, the New York bar, you do not need to have completed your LLM from a New York law school. I think all of us see students who come to our programs in our states but desire to take a bar exam elsewhere. What's important is that during your LLM studies, you're taking classes and satisfying whatever academic requirements are asked of you or required of you for the state where you ultimately want to become licensed. And so hopefully that's the sort of the short and simple answer to that question as well. We did just share the links to the individual sessions in the chat box, so hopefully you all can see those.
I think those were actually sent just to the panelists.
Okay.
You may need to send those to panelists and attendees.
Okay. And there's a question here about whether waiting to submit your bar exam application after completion of your LLM. So I guess it's a good question from the perspective of thinking about it. There's a distinction here. So before your LLM, you're applying for eligibility. You're applying to be told that you are eligible to take the bar exam. Once you're told you're eligible and then you go through the LLM program, you then, like every other person desiring to sit for the exam, needs to complete the bar exam application. So that would come at a later time. For example, in New York, the bar exam application opens in the month of April for the July sitting of the exam. And so there's sort of there's a distinction there. So as it's written here, your bar exam application would be something that you would submit later after you've started the LLM, after you've been told you've become eligible to sit for the bar, and that would come later.
So I just answered within the Q&A, I submitted our links. So hopefully people can see the links there because I don't believe they can see them on the chat. And hopefully all of you who are attending can go to the answered Q&A and see our links. And I would encourage you to select them, copy and paste them onto your own Word doc or browser so that you can join more than one school during our session afterwards.
And in our individual Zoom rooms, you can ask us questions, of course, about the bar and concentrations, but also other questions you might have about our programs.
Okay, I think this is probably a good time to wrap up. So thank you everybody for participating today. And just, I know everyone said this, I'm going to clarify. This is not going to be like a Zoom situation where the breakout room pops up and you're going to go into the room. You need to click on the links to which schools you would like to join. They're going to stay in those rooms for up to an hour. Those are their own personal rooms. So as mentioned, you can pop into as many as you'd like. So please copy and paste those. We'll leave it open for a bit here to make sure everybody can get those and that information. Thank you to our presenters today. What great information. And this is a series, so feel free to continue to come to our upcoming events. All of them are listed within the Eventbrite link that you registered for. Any final words from our from our group?
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to EducationUSA, and thanks for all the attendees. And please come join us in our rooms and we'll answer your questions directly there.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Go ask more questions.
Thanks all.